Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April Business First Wednesday, Buying and Selling a Business. I'm Melissa from the Business Insight Center at the Central Library of Rochester and Monroe County. Thank you all for joining us today. Please remember to mute your microphones and enter any questions you have into the chat. We'll answer questions throughout the presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. And if you have registered for the event, you will receive an email with the presentation slides. Just as a reminder, all services of the Business Insight Center and the Carlson Center for Intellectual Property are free and available by appointment. And now I'd like to introduce you to Karen Underwood from the SBDC.
Everybody, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to announce that Lydia is going to be speaking in reference to buying and selling a business. She's going to share some insights, but before I get to her, I want to let you know about the SBDC, and I'm a business advisor currently at the SBDC. We are affiliated with SUNY Brockport and the SBA and also the state of New York. And what our center does is we provide free and confidential business counseling to startups, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. So if you guys know of anybody that is currently looking for any type of assistance with their business, we're here to help. The funding that we receive is from the Small Business Administration, the state of New York, and our host campus, SUNY Brockport. So I just want to go ahead and introduce Lydia Palmer, and she's going to speak in reference to buying and selling a business. And she's also going to share with us what she's learned about work, life, the challenges that people face with planning a stable financial future. And then in her current role, she advises individuals and business owners on what she's learned professionally and personally over her 35-year career. And she helps individuals assist with reaching their life goals and ensuring financial security. So Lydia, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great, thank you, and welcome everybody is it spring yet? I'm not sure if it's spring or not. It changes every day. But I appreciate everyone being here and having a chance to hear a little bit of key things to keep in mind when you are transitioning your business. And I use the term transition intentionally. Buying and selling a business is obviously a transition for a business owner. Many of the things that I talk about in this apply to other varieties of transitioning. It's anytime ownership is going to change in a business, the impact on the business owner is what we're really looking at. I'm a financial advisor. I work in an independent firm that does comprehensive advising, holistic advising with all sorts of tools, all sorts of approaches, all kinds of deep assessment. The financial services industry, as many of you are likely aware, is vast. There are quite a number of different roles, from business bankers to business lawyers to myself, a financial advisor, to investment people, to people who advise you within the tactical areas of your business financially, CPAs and people like that. We all play, I would say, integrated roles, but we usually all bring sort of a different perspective to what we talk about. So I'm going to be talking with you about the things that we advise business owners to do as they prepare to transition in and out of their business. So we're going to talk about a couple of key elements. One is valuation and risk diversification. We're going to be talking about protecting a business, either the one that you are in and thinking of selling, the one that you are thinking of buying, one that you are starting. We're going to talk about how any business owner is going to look at growing that business and why that matters in a transition phase. And then we're really going to talk about this plan to exit a business in an efficient way. So the first thing we want to talk about is the valuation phase. Valuation is something that you have to think about before you talk about any kind of transition in a sale. And in fact, valuation is something that you need to be thinking about on a continuous basis, right? So why is that? Valuation is not something that's easy to determine. It's not as simple as a multiple of earnings. It's not, and it's also not something that you look at the very end of trying to sell a business. It is something that you have to look at from the beginning and continuously review and assess and update. You should usually have a good sense of how much your business is worth. That means that each year you should probably have an outsider of some variety assess the value of the business. It doesn't have to be a super formal, legally binding assessment, but you want to have an outside expert, an outside assessor look at that value. So for example, many CPAs will give you some level of valuation, either from formal down to sort of rule of thumb. We, as financial advisors, very often will do valuations for people. They are not legally binding, but we can look at all of the different elements and give you a good sense of what the value of the business is. Most business owners actually don't have a good sense of the value of their business for any variety of reasons. One is because they really love their business. It's everything that they do all day, every day, and they have no idea how valuation is done, so they overvalue the business. Some business owners really have never gone through a sale process before, and they have no idea how valuation is done, and so they undervalue the business. There are actual established methods of determining what the valuation is. So there are, on broad strokes, there's what you think it's worth, there's what the buyer thinks it's worth, and there's what the IRS thinks it's worth. The last piece, what the IRS thinks it's worth, is really important for the tax implications, obviously, of any kind of sale or purchase of a business. It is also very important, again, advising an owner on the implications of these sorts of things. It's very important from an estate planning perspective for us to have that IRS valuation. The trick with the IRS valuation is that the IRS, so I'm going to read this to you. There is this cool thing called the IRS Rev Rule 59-60, still frequently cited by the service. And essentially what it says is that the IRS can use pretty much any factor they think is important to establish the fair market value of a business for tax purposes. So you see some of the factors up there, economic trends, regulatory, geography, technology. Some of these things can all come into play over and above just the actual numbers of revenue and what goes into the business, assets held, et cetera. So proper valuation, legally binding valuation is tricky, but it's something that's important to do periodically. On an annual basis, you can substitute an occasional rough valuation, rule of thumb valuation, but about every 4 or 5 years, you should get an actual valuation done. So knowing the value of that business is a really important first step. Okay, so we're obviously talking about valuation in the form of a sale discussion or a buy discussion for business owners. Selling is part of what we would deem an exit strategy discussion, right? When you exit or transition a business, there are generally 3 broad scope ways that you can go. So any one of 3 doors. You're going to transfer to an insider, meaning you have a family member, you have a key employee, you have someone who's been by your side through the development of this business that you want to transition it to. Family member sales have dynamics. As families have family dynamics, so do selling to a family member. So there's a lot of planning that goes into not just how that family member might take over the business and what the transaction is. But again, from a business owner perspective, we're also looking at that and saying, what's the impact in the other family members? Clearly, if you have a family member who takes over, let's say you have a parent who is transitioning a business, selling a business to a child, the dynamic is you have one child who is going to take over this substantial asset in the family. The question is, if the owner has more than one child, what does that mean for the other children? That is a typical family dynamic that we experience when we're advising owners on the sale of their business. How do you balance your estate or your assets across the rest of the family members? How do you ensure that that asset that you are selling, which may very well be something that supports the long-term financial needs of you as the business owner, your spouse, how do you make sure that those assets are still there, even though you have transitioned the business to a child? That is a very typical family dynamic that we get into. All right, so that's door number 1, is that you have a close insider that you're going to sell this to. Selling to a third party is the case of what we normally tend to think of as a sale, which is we go out, we shop the business around. Maybe you're working with a business broker and you want to say, okay, someone that I do not know is going to tell me, I love your business and I want to buy it, and we agree on a price and the transaction goes from there. I mentioned the idea of selling to a competitor. That is one viable option for many business owners if they are actually transitioning out of the business entirely. You may very well find that you have a competitor that wants to buy your assets, your client base, etc. And you can find that to be viable because these are people who know your business and know it well. So they're going to have a good sense of the true value of the business. There are business brokers that can be employed when you are selling to a third party. People who shepherd you through, just like if you're buying a house and you have a realtor, a business broker will shepherd you through the process. They'll help match you to potential buyers. They'll do all sorts of things that help you through that process. And if you have a business of significant assets, significant valuation, it may be wise for you to engage a business broker in the process. There's also merger and acquisition firms. That tends to be if you have a larger business that you're looking at how you would do that as a legal action. But same thing, there's people who can help you with that third party process. The third option for transitioning out of your business is you leave, right? You leave. You die with your boots on. You're going to stay there, or you find yourself staying there until such a time as you suddenly no longer, in some shape or form, can run the business. The reason that I mentioned that as one of these 3 options is that every single one of them should have at least a plan in your business plans for what if we pursue this, right? So you may not even be thinking when you start your business of how you're going to exit. Many people will tell you that's exactly when you should start thinking about how you're going to exit your business. And you should understand it may be this insider transfer, that may be what you're thinking, but you may find when it comes time to sell the business that that insider is like, yeah, you know what? I've really thought about this and it's not something that I want to take on. Family dynamics. You can have a kid who was the one that you thought was going to take over the business. And when the time comes, they say, gee, you know, mom, dad, I just don't see myself running this business forever. I might continue to work in it, but I don't want to run it. Selling to a third party has its own particular challenges. Is that third party person going to be available? Will you have identified someone to sell the company to when you are ready to do it? If not, what's the plan? How long is it going to take you to find the right person? If selling to a third party happens all of a sudden to be the option because an insider has said, yeah, no, I'm not interested in this, you kind of have to have that as a what if we go through door number 2 plan, right? And the third plan, the idea of you leaving the business because you literally at least leave the ability to work and may actually leave the world as we know it. You have to have in your planning as a business owner, what if this happens? Because it has, even if, you know, we're talking about worst case scenarios, if a business owner dies, that business is your asset and usually your largest asset. And you're going to have to think in terms of what does this mean for my family? What does it mean for all of the people who work in this business? If I die, I should have a plan in place that says, here's what will happen so that the business has continuity, so that your family is protected and taken care of, so that you know that there is a good idea of what the steps are for transitioning in that environment. So proper planning, or I'm sorry, I'm going to skip this slide. The proper planning slide, this is what we're saying. This is why I said that we're looking at actually 3 phases. Whether it applies to you're going to buy a business and how are you going to protect it? How are you going to grow it? How are you going to be ready to exit? Whether you are currently in a business, are you protecting it well? Is your family protected? Is it growing well? Is it healthy? Is it a viable sale option? And ultimately, are you going to be able to leave when it is time for you to leave? So let's talk in terms of protecting your business. The first thing that we tell people in protecting the business is make sure you have a really strong team of advisors. I mentioned the scope of financial services and business services. It is important for you to have a good relationship with a business lawyer. It is a good, an important thing to have a good relationship with a financial advisor, the people who do the type of advising that we do. It's important for you to have a good bank relationship if you haven't established that already. These are people who throughout the time that you are operating this business are going to advise you and ensure that you are properly planning for the risks of running the business. How do you mitigate those? And they're watching out for your best interests. In the ideal scenario, your business lawyer, your financial advisor, your CPA, your banker, they all know each other. And they know what the plans are that are put in place for you from each other so that they can bring that different perspective. So if we, as financial advisors, are talking with a business owner's CPA, the CPA looks at everything through this lens and says, you should do this, this, and this, right? But a financial advisor is going to look at it from a different lens, and they may say, I understand why the CPA is directing you to do this, but we're looking at it through this perspective. And this is the impact of one of those items. So we would recommend you do something different. And then we figure out how to make it work overall in the best interests of the client. Having a singular advisor, you lose that perspective. So we very frequently will meet business owners who have a CPA. And that's great, but their CPA is the only person that they really talk to. And they're missing that breadth of perspective. They're also, I mean, just from a protective perspective, you're putting an awful lot of eggs in one basket if you're dealing with one or maybe at the most two advisors. I've worked with business owners who, when they first come in and start talking to me, I'll ask them questions about the direction that they're going with their business tax filing or how they handle this, that, or the other. And they honestly, they truly don't know. They don't know because they have handed everything over to their CPA and they're counting on their CPA doing things right. Most CPAs are skilled at what they do, but boy, that's a pretty big risk component in my view, to say, yes, we're gonna invest that, not even invest, turn that kind of authority and decision-making over to a CPA who is not actually as vested in your business as you are. So yeah, build a strong team, build a diverse team. Your team may change over time, so you may outgrow a small business banker and need someone with a broader set of products and services and knowledge base. Some CPAs are incredibly adept at dealing with very small businesses. As you grow, you may find you need a firm that has more depth to it. So don't be afraid to say to yourself periodically, are the people on my team still the people that I need, or do I need to add to the team, or do I need to change team members? Another aspect of protecting that is really important is this buy-sell agreement. Buy-sell agreements are necessary when you have multiple owners. They're necessary if you have identified a party to whom you are going to transfer the business, whether it's an insider or an outsider, because a buy-sell agreement sets the terms for the transfer and it identifies the triggers that would initiate the transfer, and it establishes how the transfer of a business is going to be funded. It's not uncommon at all that a buy-sell agreement, which is a legal document, doesn't actually properly account for the value of the business that would have to be paid by the new owner. As an example, we regularly review people's buy-sell agreements in our office, and we find that they have a business that is producing X revenue, right? But the buy-sell agreement says that the new owner, let's say it's an internal transfer or a partner is buying out another partner, the buy-sell agreement says that the new owner would have to pay Y amount of money in order to buy the business. We kind of joke that sometimes lawyers have written beautifully worded buy-sell agreements, but they can't do math because the revenue generated by the business actually would not support the sales transaction that has to happen over a defined period of time without the current owner really investing every dollar coming out of the business into that buy-sell agreement. It's an important thing to have. This is again where your team comes into play. You're going to have a business lawyer, that's great, but have a financial advisor and a CPA review the buy-sell agreement and really look to make sure that it is properly funded. Those valuations that we talked about at the beginning, that is also a part of a properly structured buy-sell agreement. That valuation is going to change over time. It has to be updated, and the buy-sell agreement has to be updated to reflect that the value of the business has changed. Protecting owners and key employees means making sure that you have the assets and structures in place that protect those individuals, so you are protecting the business. The value of a business is going to change dramatically if the owner is unable to work for a period of time. The value of a business is going to change dramatically if a key employee leaves. If you are selling the business and you do not have structures in place for those key employees to stay after the sale, the purchaser of the business is going to see the value of it differently than they would if you had structures in place to keep key employees in the business through the transition. How does this work? Well, there's a number of different ways that you can protect the owner's health and life. We're talking about insurance vehicles in that case. Very frequently, we find owners, especially small business owners, do not have the disability insurance in place that they need to have. Meaning it's never occurred to them that they're going to have an 18-month or a 2-year or a 3-year span where they physically are unable to work. But if they experience a disability, which 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people during their normal working years may experience that. That's sort of the statistic for disabilities. When you experience a disability and the owner cannot work, all sorts of things happen. For one thing, just on the basis of the function of the company, if they're the key decision maker and they don't have people in place who are able to step up and take on those key decisions, there's a huge business interruption when someone has a disability. The other thing is that very often business owners have unsecured debt as part of running that business, and some of that unsecured debt can come due. How are you going to pay for it if you've lost all income that is there to identify that this owner, should they be unable to work for a period of time, that they're being paid? So that disability piece is really important. It also applies to key employees. If you have a CFO in your company, or if you have 2 partners in a company or 3 partners in a company, and 1 or 2 of those partners leaves, you have a problem. And the way that you can effectively and efficiently not only protected the business, but incent those people to stay is very often through establishing disability policies and life insurance policies that will cover the financial impact of someone leaving for whatever reason, but also incent them to stay because they provide a true asset that is tied to the company that a key employee would lose if they left. We've heard the term golden handcuffs, right? And that is a very true thing. It's an incentive plan, or it is an incentive asset that says to an employee, you're working here for something bigger than just your paycheck. You are working here to build this other asset that you can take on. That protective aspect of ensuring continuity in the business and ensuring that those key employees stay is really, really important, not just in having the business be healthy, but going back to that valuation and ensuring that that the value of the business includes the people who are part of the business. The last piece there is the owner estate plans coordinating with the business plans. I mentioned that transition of a business for the owner is a pretty important aspect of their long-term estate plans. How does that asset that is the business transition into the asset that is what the owner takes with them when they leave, whether it's from retirement, whether it's when you pass away and that asset has to be accounted for in your estate. You want to make sure that those owners' estate plans, which are a protective aspect for the owner, coordinate with what it says in the business plan. That's a really important piece. And again, that's where your financial advisor, not necessarily a CPA or a banker, that's where a financial advisor is going to look at, here's what the buy-sell agreements and the estate plans, the buy-sell agreements and the business plans say, here's what the estate plans say, are they in alignment? Okay. All right, so once we pass out of the protective phase, right, and getting all of those protective aspects set up, now we're into growing. Now you may be saying, well, what does growing have to do with selling a business? Well, obviously, having a healthy growing business makes for a higher valuation, and it makes for a business sale or a business purchase that is defining what the value of the business is, how much you're either going to receive from the sale or how much you're going to have to pay in order to take over the business. So in early stages of a business, there's nothing that is going to give you more growth than reinvesting in the business. So every business owner knows that this is their asset. Most of them say this is where we're really going to invest our money. We're going to pour it back into the business. As financial advisors, I would tell you that it is a sort of a niche area to be an advisor to business owners, where you are advising on ways to increase the assets held within the business to positively affect that valuation and the future growth. Many financial advisors, in fact, many business owners don't like to talk to people like me because they've had people knock on their door and say, hey, I'm here, I'm a financial advisor, and I'm going to help you as a business owner. And really what they're doing is saying, you got a great business, lots of money building up. This is terrific, good revenue stream. How much of it can we take out of the business and put over here into some other asset for you? And it moves the asset outside of the business when what you're really trying to do is reinvest in that business. So we recognize that, and it's important for you when you are working with advisors to find someone who says, yeah, we want to see how we can ensure that growth is happening here first and foremost. And then once you get to the point where there is revenue generation and income for a business owner that is high enough that it's worth looking at investing outside of the business. So we recognize that that's the first place that the money goes, is back into the business. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but that growing piece also includes attracting and retaining good employees. That's usually done through a variety of reward options. Key employee incentive plans are what we get to conversations about in this phase with a business owner. There are a number of deferred compensation, non-qualified, meaning the employee does not get a tax break for it, but non-qualified deferred compensation plans that are those carrots for key employees to stay in your business. And unlike many of the benefit plans that a company would put in place, you can, using air quotes, discriminate in these types of plans, because you can say, I am applying this plan to these 5 employees. You don't have to necessarily make them available to everyone. So you can identify who you are really concerned about retaining within the business and create incentive plans for them that are unique to them, that are not available to everyone else. That said, the piece of growing that is making your business the type of business that people want to work for, and also finding really effective ways as a business owner to create that the you that's the business that you can take with you is often done through a variety of retirement funding plans. You can have more than one retirement plan, so you can have a 401k or a safe harbor or some type of a profit sharing plan, but then you can also have these deferred compensation plans layered on top, which enables an owner to create a sizable asset within the company that is theirs to take when they leave. That helps on a number of points when you are looking at transitioning out of the business, because you don't find yourself in quite the pressure of maximizing the sales dollars, because you know that when the business sells, these assets are going to leave with you. I just lost. Screen sharing has stopped. I don't know why my screen sharing stopped. I'm sorry. But I think, let me just double check my notes here. Yes, I'm sorry. Let me get my screen share back up here because I really don't know why that disappeared. Share. Run. Run. Okay. And I'm going to swap this so you don't have to read my notes. How's that? Okay. Are we good? Can everyone see my screen again? Apologies for that. Okay. Last phase. Exiting and selling. Okay. A lot of this is having the plans in place before you actually begin the process of executing a transition, selling, buying, retiring, whatever, right? There's no real clear, simple steps to exiting a business, because each one of these individual bullets has quite a number of managerial, legal, and financial elements that play into them. Everything that you do before you exit, whether it's from sale, whether it's from retirement, everything determines how well you're going to transition from your ownership role, and how financially strong you are as a business owner as you're leaving. There's a number of things. Gosh, sorry about this. There is a number of things that make a huge difference. If the business has life insurance on employees, that can make a difference. Making sure that your insider is chosen, prepared, groomed, if you will, to take over the business, and properly funded to take over the business is a key element. If you are moving your business to an outsider, if you're anticipating an outside sale, preparing the clients and the employees for transition is also incredibly important. We talked about the importance of having employees retained through that transition. There is also the importance of having clients retained through the transition. Are they informed? Are they aware of what's happening? Are they comfortable with the idea that you are selling? How are they feeling? This is a really important thing, because if your buyer anticipates that there's going to be an outflow of clients in the first year, again, that's going to affect your valuation. It's going to affect the attractiveness of the sale of your business. And then the last piece is the idea, again, of valuation being a continuous process during the time that you own that business. Are you able to see a trend line that the value is increasing? Are you able to clearly define the value? Have you even defined the value at all? And have you had the official versions of your valuation done versus just having a sense in your own mind of how much you think the business is worth? I will give you one really interesting, sorry. I'm going to give you one really interesting case that I experienced about 2 years ago. I was contacted by someone that I knew from a past life. I used to work in commercial printing many years ago. And I was contacted by somebody that I knew from that world who had just purchased from a family run print shop with they had about 20, 25 employees. He had purchased this print shop with the intention that he was going to take it over, run it, grow it, and ultimately sell it after a period of growth. And when we first sat down and talked about it, we were talking about something very specific that he wanted information on. But when we first sat down and talked about it, he used the phrase, "Yes, this business is my retirement plan." And I said, what does that mean? And he explained that his plan, and he was very clear in his mind, was that he paid this much for the business. He had leveraged all of his other retirement plans, most of his other assets in order to buy that business. And he had a business plan that said over the course of 7 to 10 years, he would grow the business from what he paid for it to about $7 million more than what he paid for it. And then he would sell it. And that was his retirement fund. I want to go back to the very beginning. He bought a commercial print shop, ink on paper. There are still ink on paper print shops that are running and producing revenue and generating decent business. But I would call that a risk for a business owner that I'm not sure was well advised. And finding he also had the transition plan in place. He had a person that he had brought in with him when he purchased the business that was sort of his second in command, his operations person that was going to buy the business. And I said, that's fantastic, because boy, that person really knows that business. And by the time you're ready to transition it, they're going to be really well versed in this. How are they going to pay you $7 million plus for that business? And they had no idea, because they really hadn't thought about, oh, gee, I guess when this person buys this, they'll go out and likewise figure out what they can leverage and get loans and have all of this long-term debt plan for them to own the business. It was a let me just say a house built on sand in a lot of factors. So we actually did not continue the advisement of this business owner. I wish him well. I hope things are going great. I see where he had some opportunities, but the plan and the protection and the knowledge of how this buy, protect, grow, sell, exit just was not there. And now he had this very compressed timeline that he was working in, and we just said, wow, we're not sure we're going to be the best advisor for you, because we just see a level of risk in your business plan that we're not sure we're going to be able to mitigate for you. So that's why all of these different elements are so important. They're important to have in place as early as possible. They're important to keep updated and maintained throughout the life of your business, Certainly, when you're ready to sell, certainly if you're looking at buying a business, you want to make sure that these types of protective and growth assets are in place. And ultimately, when you do sell or exit, how successful you are is going to be dependent on how well you have done that planning throughout the life of the business. Questions? Do you want me to am I pulling up the chat or? Nope, I've got a personal message in there, but I'm ready to take questions to the extent that I'm able.
Yeah, if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat.
And I would also tell you that my contact information, I think, is in the invitation. You certainly look me up at allianceadvisorygroup.com. If you have questions after this event, I am more than happy to try and answer your questions. And if you want further information about how we go about some of the details underneath those slides, we're more than happy to meet with a business owner, talk about where you are right now, what you need to do going forward. Our firm, as a financial advising firm, has not just myself and my fellow advisors who work in here, who all have areas of specialization. I have a colleague who is very knowledgeable about the food and beverage industry, wineries, distilleries, etc., people working in that industry. I have a colleague who is himself a former restaurant owner who has bought and sold 2 or 3 restaurants. So he's used to working with people who work in that hospitality area. But we also, as part of, so Alliance Advisory Group is an independent firm, but we are connected to the Guardian network of insurance companies. And that home office structure includes an entire business resource center with MBAs, PhDs, JDs with business backgrounds, and they do a lot of the actual tactical work around doing valuations and reviewing the buy-sell agreements. So there's a pretty sizable team behind our firm to help advise business owners through these processes.
Okay, so it looks like we don't have any questions. So in that case, that is the end of our program. I'd like to thank Lydia for speaking with us today. A recording of this presentation will be posted on YouTube on the Rochester Central Library website. We will email all registered participants with a copy of presentation slides as well as a link to that recording.